What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Friday, December 1st, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. And getting on into the news here, obviously the big news, you've probably seen it all over the corporate media, is that Michael Flynn is about to plead guilty to lying to the FBI. And there's apparently a plea bargain deal in the works, which a lot of people are very concerned, is that Robert Mueller is going to arm twist Flynn into saying something that can be used to go after Donald Trump. And basically, this lying to the FBI about this conversation with the Russian ambassador, at one point, they're charging him with willful lying, but it came across like maybe it just slipped his mind. But the reality is that nothing Flynn did was illegal, and as a member of the incoming administration, it was his business to start cultivating contacts with the Russian government. So Mueller and the media are trying to spin this around that Trump is Putin's puppet and we've got to get rid of him because Russia's the enemy, which technically, no, we're not at war with Russia just yet. And, I mean, I'll be honest, Russia's not my enemy. I'm a big boy. I'll decide who my friends and enemies are, and Russia's not on that list. I mean, I didn't send Putin a Christmas card this year, but, you know where we're going on that. So basically, Flynn is in trouble not so much for the lying to the FBI, because that's a small charge, especially given that what he lied about was not a crime, and none of it implicates Trump himself. But apparently Flynn did have some dealings with Turkey, which carry a much stiffer penalty, and that appears to be the lever that Mueller is using to try and get Flynn to say something, anything that they can use to go after Donald Trump. And if anybody from the Trump White House is listening to the show, it's true I don't agree with Trump's war policy or what he's doing for the economy, and I'm very frustrated that he has not thrown Hillary Clinton in prison. But if Trump does not put on those presidential brass knuckles right now and start defending himself, he's going to be in serious, serious trouble. He's got to fight back. He's got to take the initiative, and he doesn't have it right now. Now, getting on down to Judge Roy Moore in Alabama, apparently Breitbart was interviewing yet another individual claiming that Roy Moore is racist, and apparently this lady is a former police officer, was saying that she was told to watch him at ball games, make sure that he didn't hang around with the cheerleaders. And when pressed on the issue, it all came on out. She had absolutely no evidence to back up the claim that Moore is racist or that he wants to bring back segregation. She said, "It's just my feeling. I feel this is what he is." Well, that's pretty thin to the point of transparency. Meanwhile, Conyers just had a little press conference and said that he is not stepping down, even though a lot of people, including Nancy Pelosi, are saying that maybe he ought to, because apparently the allegations against him are a lot more credible than the ones against Moore. And a lot of John Conyers' former aides are trying to come to his defense. One of them came on out and said, "Yeah, he walked around in his underwear all the time. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. You guys are making such a fuss about that, but we got to get Moore and we got to get Trump here." Now, apparently, an influential Democratic donor, Jeremy Goldberg, 20 years old, was caught trying to lure a 12-year-old girl into his SUV in New York. And the young girl basically was just waiting for a bus, and he said, I'll give you a ride. And she basically ran away from him, reported to the police officers, the police what was going on. When the officers showed up, Goldberg basically sped away and crashed into a bus. So it does seem like there's a lot of sickos out there. All righty, let's get some phone calls here. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Yeah, there are a lot of sickos out there, but one sicko that I don't understand why the deep state is attacking him is George H.W. Bush, who's part of the deep state. You think they're trying to ruin his credibility because maybe he's going to make a deathbed confession that he maybe was the architect of the JFK assassination? I mean, what do you think?
I think we're seeing a system that's starting to eat its own. And I've noticed they've gone after George W. Bush as well. And it may be that, yeah, they're concerned that he's going to break ranks. Remember when E. Howard Hunt passed away, he made a deathbed confession about the John F. Kennedy assassination. So, yeah, they may be concerned about that.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And we're going to take a phone call from Lou in California. Lou, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Wie geht's es Ihnen, Mike?
It's good. Danke.
Yeah, frohe Weihnachten.
Little early, you know, but we'll get there.
Yes. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm glad it's Friday. It was a rough week. I need the weekend off.
Yeah, I know, with the sound system and all that, huh?
Oh, yeah, when Claire takes the microphone in hour number 3, I'm just going to fall asleep.
There you go. I got a couple of questions and concerns there, Mike. First of all, that Argentinian submarine that's been in the news this month, but I think it's been now a week or so that it's been out of the news. You got anything on that story there, Mike?
Well, they're assuming the submarine is lost, and apparently there was a sonic event detected in the area, and finally the Argentine government came on out and said there had been one final radio communication. Apparently they were running with the snorkel up to charge the submarine's batteries, and for some reason the little flap valve on the snorkel failed, and all of a sudden seawater started pouring into the submarine, which sparked a fire. And at this point, with enough volume of water, it probably sank below its crush depth.
Oh, okay. So
well, that would be more merciful than if they just bottomed out. I mean, if you think about it, of the ways that people in a submarine can die, if they just rest on the bottom, then they asphyxiate over a period of days, whereas an implosion, they're dead instantaneously. They may not even feel hardly anything.
Yeah, because they reported that explosion, that it was around that submarine.
Yes.
But then the news, the corporate media just stopped reporting basically when after that all happened.
Well, the sub is gone and the crew is lost, and there just isn't really any more to report. I don't even know if they're going to try and find the wreckage. They certainly can't salvage it. I mean, look how long it took for the U.S. to finally go down and take a look at Scorpion and Thresher.
Oh, yeah. So basically, I guess they're presumed dead then at this point.
Yes. Let's switch over to Mike in The Last Frontier. Insert ominous music here.
And I wanted to comment real quickly on this natural gas you mentioned about China.
Yes. They signed a deal with Alaska. Now, they haven't committed to building that pipeline across the gap there, but it's a distinct possibility, and it's going to be a heck of an engineering project.
Problem with the natural gas is that it's not like oil as far as shipping goes. It's not cost effective to ship it.
Even liquefied.
So people want that heavy oil.
Hello?
People want that heavy oil, Mike, but the natural gas, there's quite a bit also in Australia and Indonesia. So I'm not sure that the Chinese would take it Did you get any details from the article you read about who will they be buying it, or just building the infrastructure?
The article seemed to indicate China wanted to buy it. Right now, because the heavy oil is becoming scarcer and harder to get to the surface, they're starting to look at natural gas, which exists in huge amounts. I mean, look at all these refineries where they're just flaring off the natural gas because there's nothing else they can do with it. And so the current thinking within the industry is, let's stop just burning that off and find ways that we can deliver it to customers.
That's exactly right. They've been flaring it up on the North Slope for 30 or 40 years because it comes up with the oil.
Yes.
And energy costs got pretty high a couple of years ago, and there was this huge push to build it's kind of like the F-35. They're trying to do so many things such as lower local energy costs and then export it. And they wanted to put it onto the railroad system and then they actually have a trucking system set up. So it's interesting, but it's a boondoggle. That's all I want to throw in there, is that the Japanese were interested for a while, and they offered to build the liquefaction plant and got turned down. Now we're over talking with China. I got a bad feeling, Mike.
Well, I'm glad that there's still a semblance of peaceful coexistence and commerce with China, because ultimately, looking at the U.S. war agenda, that yuan is still a target.
When I was in Taiwan, I asked, because they use a lot of natural gas. Yeah. I just started asking people, where does it come from? And they have a little bit, but they're producing quite a bit with a $1 trillion economy on a small island, and they need a lot of energy resources. But it's coming from Indonesia, Australia, so it's too bad it's being flared off, but it's not like the oil. There still is so much oil up there, but we can't get those big companies to produce it. They've got a lot locked in reserve that they don't want to develop for geopolitical reasons. So that's all I had today. It's a really difficult topic, but I'm one of those people too that would like to just trade with everybody and get along. So, but we got to be smart about it.
Yeah, I agree. We have to be smart about it. And yeah, there are oil reserves that are not yet being developed. The oil companies like to produce just enough to meet customer demand. They don't want an oversupply because that will drive prices down. So, yeah, they're going to leave some of that oil in the ground for some point in the future when they're going to need it. But as the heavy oil supplies start to shrink, I mean, we're already hearing that Saudi Arabia is already looking forward to a day where they're not going to have oil coming out of that ground. And at that point, the surplus of methane coming out of the earth, that becomes a viable alternative. Okay.
Mike, I appreciate your input, and I'm glad you got your tech stuff sorted. I'm going to keep listening. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm glad we got the tech stuff sorted as well. And right now we're working on a new system to replace BAMuser, and that's probably going to be actually better than what we had before. Now, getting on back to the news. The New York Times reported yesterday morning that sometime in the near future, probably January, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will be ousted in favor of sitting CIA Director Mike Pompeo. And Pompeo's job will be taken over by Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who is hawkish. And at this point, we're getting confirmations from everywhere that it's going to happen. The problem is with Pompeo as Secretary of State, it moves us closer to wars with Iran and North Korea. And again, this stuff could spin totally out of control. I mean, look how the smear job on Roy Moore spun out of control and backflashed on the Democrats. So once the war is going, nobody really knows how it's going to end. And common sense tells you, when two nations go to war, both nations are convinced they're going to win. And obviously, half the time, they're going to be wrong. Now, speaking about Tom Cotton, he received nearly $1 million to oppose the Iran deal. So he had his hand out. Somebody greased his palm, this group. He got $960,000 into his campaign. And after that, he led the writing of this letter signed by 47 Republicans stating that a GOP White House would not adhere to any accords with Iran. Now, technically, he's crossing a line because foreign policy is exclusively the domain of the White House and the State Department. Members of Congress are supposed to be concerned with this country. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And time to get out your paper and pencil, because if you want to help Republic Broadcasting, and folks, we need it. We wouldn't ask if we didn't need it. Nobody's getting rich in this business. We're not driving supercars and going out and having wild parties. We're just hanging on. We're just getting by. We're dedicated to doing this job of keeping Americans fully informed. So if you want to help Republic Broadcasting, the postal address to send a check, money order, box tops, whatever, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to phone in a donation with a debit card or credit card, the number is 800-724-2719. That's 800-724-2719, extension 03. Now, getting on back to the news here, we're talking about Senator Tom Cotton, who is a Republican, and I don't understand why Trump is moving him to take over Mike Pompeo's job at the CIA, because it's reducing the Republican Senate lead, the advantage over the Democrats. So that's the reason for the big fight over Judge Roy Moore. The Democrats are trying to gain a majority in the Senate and the House next year. Now, I don't know what the rules are in Tom Cotton's home state. I know in many of the states, the governor is required to appoint a replacement from the same party, but it doesn't apply to all states. So we'll keep an eye on what's going on there. Now, we did this little flashback story about this letter with the 47 senators saying, we don't agree with the Iran deal. We think it's a bad idea. Now, everybody else who signed that P5+1 deal, they thought it was great. They thought it was a wonderful thing. It's only the war hawks in this country and Israel that want the deal to be destroyed and open the door to a war with Iran. Now, the House Special Investigation Committee is issuing subpoenas now, and they were served to the acting director of the State Department of Health, Preston Dorfinger, Office of Management and Enterprise Services Acting Director Denise Northrup, and Governor Follin's Chief of Staff Chris Benge. And apparently the committee is looking into the financial mismanagement of the health department, which led to a $30 million debt. And apparently there have already been resignations in the light of this scandal as well. Is this the best we can do for politicians? Is this the best we can do for people to run this country? Now, up in Massachusetts, Senate leaders are saying they'll hire an independent special investigator to look into allegations of sexual misconduct by Brian Hefner, the husband of Senate President Stanley C. Rosenberg. And Senate Majority Leader Harriet Chandler said the decision is unprecedented, but it's the right thing to do. Find out if it really happened before you destroy someone's life. And we have already seen too many instances where people are being fired over an allegation. Nobody waits for the proof. And as we have seen with Judge Roy Moore, and also last year with Donald Trump, a lot of these women making these allegations are just, they're making it up. This police woman, who's the latest one to come out against Roy Moore, apparently Judge Moore sent her brother to prison. So there's obviously a motive for her to try and hurt him. Payback, revenge. Got to look at these things very, very closely. Sean Hannity did a show, and he's doing wonderful work out there, where he has drawn out the links showing Jeff Sessions' ties with the Clintons' corrupt cabal. And he had a little chart there showing all the financial links about how Jeff Sessions is profiting from what the Clintons have been doing. And that is another reason why he's out to protect her. And if you look at the sheer scale of how much of that government inside the Beltway are trying to protect Hillary Clinton, that right there is a good indicator of just how corrupt the government has become. Because they're not protecting her because they like Hillary Clinton. Hardly anybody does. But they're protecting their own involvement in some of these scandals. They're protecting the narcocracy. They're protecting the government-sanctioned gun and drug running. If that all came out to full view of the American people, this government would be over and done with. Americans are not going to sit still for a government that says, you know, we have a war on drugs and drugs are bad, and then turns out to be the largest smuggler, dealer of illicit substances in the entire country. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Hillary Clinton is now facing money laundering allegations. And this is on top of the earlier allegation about how they laundered the money that went to pay for that dodgy dossier through Fusion GPS, so it wouldn't show up on campaign records as being what it was for. But apparently there's been a discovery that the Clinton Foundation has underreported the donations from Rosatom as part of the Uranium One deal. Now, supposedly there was $145 million donated to the Clinton Foundation connected to the Uranium One deal, and now they're saying there actually seems to have been a lot more, and nobody knows exactly where it went. It's time for that foundation to be fully audited. And it's rather amazing, actually I think the word would be disgusting, to see the machinery of government dedicated to going after Donald Trump and just working as hard as they can to not have to look into Uranium Gate, Primary Gate, Dossier Gate, and all those other scandals. We are way beyond Richard Nixon and Watergate at this point. Now, Judicial Watch has released some of the documents that they obtained from the FBI regarding that meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch at the airport. And originally the FBI claimed they didn't have anything. Judicial Watch went to court, and finally the FBI said, okay, we got some documents, and here you can have them. And what's really interesting is the documents are less about the actual meeting and focus mostly on controlling leaks. And they were very concerned about the leak that Bill Clinton delayed his aircraft taking off in order to maneuver this meeting with the Attorney General. And so that was the FBI's focus. They don't care if Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch are working out a deal to save Hillary Clinton, but by golly, they got to hunt down these the leaker who's making it look bad to the American people. My goodness, we can't have that happen. So the FBI was unconcerned about what crimes Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch may be discussing. They were after that whistleblower. We got to get that whistleblower. And remember, it was only a few days after that tarmac meeting that James Comey had that very strange press conference where he went down the laundry list of Title 18 felony violations committed by Hillary Clinton, and then ending with his recommendation she not be charged, which is not the FBI's job. And, of course, Loretta Lynch said, well, we're going to take the FBI's recommendation, and that was basically it. A get-out-of-jail-free card. Now, politics is perception, and the perception is that Loretta Lynch and James Comey and certainly the Clintons are crookeder than a dog's hind leg. They're so crooked, they have to screw their socks on in the morning. Now, over at the New York Times, they have crossed the line from journalism, not that they've been unbiased and objective, and now they're actually openly using their newspaper and website for lobbying for the Democrats. And apparently on the editorial pages, rather than simply sharing the opinion that they didn't agree with the Republicans' tax reform legislation, the New York Times editorial page was actively encouraging their readers to call their members of Congress, call them United States senators, and say, stop this bill. And that is way out of line. That's not what a news media organization is supposed to do. Now then, getting on over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. And it's getting really tense over there. Apparently the Syrian army and a Syrian state television team earlier today entered the eastern Lebanese town of Tafal, one day after around 110 Lebanese and Syrian families returned to the town. So this is another one of these areas that's been cleared out of ISIS, Al-Qaeda. So that was a good thing here. Now, the U.S.-led coalition is acknowledging killing more than 800 civilians in Iraq and Syria airstrikes. I would bet you a nickel the number is actually much higher, but they're admitting to 801 who've been unintentionally killed by coalition strikes. That's a lot of people. They're not picking their targets. Now, the U.S. government has a polite term for all this. It's called collateral damage. Like, you shouldn't care. There was just collateral damage. It really isn't important. It wasn't militarily significant, therefore don't care about it. That's a tough sell for the families and friends of those 801 people. I mean, if the U.S. government accidentally dropped a bomb on your house and killed most of your family, would you be happy with collateral damage? That's all it is. Why are you so upset? Now, as you know, everybody is in a lather over North Korea's recent ballistic missile test, which showed that North Korea has developed a new longer-range rocket, longer range than even the Taepodong 2. And looking at the photo I saw of it, it looks like they did figure out that making the rockets too thin did make them fragile. So this one's a lot bulkier. And they launched it at 2,800 miles straight into space and came right on back down. And working out the energy it takes to reach that high in space, it's easy to calculate just how far it could fly around the globe on a flat trajectory. And yes, it could hit much of the U.S. mainland, which I'm hoping makes Hawaii a less of a target if things do go south with North Korea. But satellite photos appear to be showing that North Korea may be preparing another missile launch. This is the headline that we're seeing in Zero Hedge. But what they've actually found on the satellite images, the North Korean military is constructing another launch pad. Well, that may indicate a much more rapid test cycle, but you don't build a new launch pad for each new missile test. So I'm not sure that another missile launch is imminent. It's certainly going to happen at some point. North Korea is going to be testing their weapons to improve them, make sure that they work, just as the United States does. Or the next island over there, the Pacific Missile Test Range. They're constantly shooting rockets off from there. Or for those of you in Southern California, Vandenberg. You've probably seen those clouds, those strange colored clouds left in the sky at sunset from a missile launch. Now, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, is out there saying it's time to drop all this pretense about concern about North Korea's nuclear weapons, because it's sounding a lot like U.S. concerns about Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons and Assad's sarin gas. And Lavrov is saying that the U.S. should just come clean. If it's looking for a pretext to destroy North Korea, just be honest and say, we want to destroy North Korea. And stop trying to come up with some kind of an excuse or justification, because frankly, at this stage of the game, nobody's going to believe it anyway. It's obvious the Russian government doesn't buy any of this. The American people aren't buying any of this. All of these war hawks may be going to bed at night just saying, they believe us, they do believe us, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. I'm sure all Americans believe us here. No, they don't here. Now, back in 2008, U.S. President George W. Bush declared the U.S. would stop using cluster bombs by 2019. Now, cluster bombs are very nasty weapons. They're aerial denial weapons, and what a cluster bomb is there's a large outer casing that looks like a regular bomb, and on the way down, the casing peels away, and inside are hundreds of these little tiny submunitions, about the size of a baseball, that will explode when they hit the ground. And they have been responsible for a lot of civilian deaths. And as a matter of fact, before her death, even Princess Diana was trying to build a global campaign to ban the use of these weapons. Now, part of the problem is that sometimes these bomblets, these cluster bomb munitions, are set for delay, or they're set to be landmines. Just stay there until something drives over them or somebody steps on them, and then they go off. That's what makes them such a problem for the countries on which they're used. Even the bomblets that are supposed to explode instantly on impact have a high failure rate. As much as 20% of the bomblets released in modern cluster bombs fail to detonate on first use. And as they sit there on the ground, again, somebody drives over them or steps on them, or just time and corrosion, they can go off at random. And that was why Bush said we were going to get rid of them by 2019. Unfortunately, yesterday, the Pentagon declared that they're going to change the policy, that cluster bombs have a legitimate use in military operations, and the U.S. will continue to use them. Now, getting on back to Syria, Israel has granted the first Golan Heights oil drilling license to a company linked to Dick Cheney. And this is Genie Energy, a local subsidiary of the company, which is advised by former Vice President Dick Cheney, and whose shareholders include Jacob Rothschild and Rupert Murdoch. And they now have exclusive rights to a 153-square-mile radius in the southern part of the Golan Heights. This, of course, is going to be controversial. Israel seized the Golan Heights in the Six-Day War in 1967 and annexed the territory in 1981. Its administration of the area is not recognized by international law. No other country on earth recognizes that annexation. Okay, our sirens are going off here. They're testing our new, the tsunami siren to be followed by our nuclear attack siren. So this is the first time we're going to be hearing that. Now, getting on over to Europe, Angela Merkel is feeling the pressure. She was unable to form a coalition government. The polls are definitely turning against her. And it now seems inevitable there are going to be new elections, and she'll probably do worse in the new elections than she did before. She's also coming under fire from her own government for spending too much time and energy trying to control the whole European Union from inside Germany. And this came from Alex Schaefer. He's a member of Parliament for Germany's Social Democratic Party. And it's basically saying it's not your Europe. And remember what happened to the last German leader who decided they were going to be in charge of all of Europe. Okay. There's still sirening out there. Alrighty, now then, let's get on to the wonderful world of refugees and migrants. One of the big problems they're dealing with, first of all, it seems like everybody is cutting the illegal immigrants and the migrants a lot of slack. They seem to be getting away with a lot of things. I'm going to be talking about the Kate Steinle verdict next year. But up in Portland, there was this Muslim migrant was running a halal grocery store, and he's apparently was running a welfare scam. So Ali Ratib Daham pled guilty to federal food stamp and welfare fraud. He also admitted to money laundering and theft from the state's main care program. Daham's going to spend 33 months and will pay more than $1 million in restitution to the government. In exchange, prosecutors are agreeing to drop dozens of other charges in the case. The plea deal will be considered in federal district court Tuesday. Now, he's pleading not guilty, because if he pled guilty, that would immediately cause him to be deported. But none of this would have happened in the first place if we had a secure border and a reasonably intelligent immigration policy. Which gets us onto this case of Jose Ines Garcia Zarate, who yesterday was found not guilty of first-degree murder, not guilty of second-degree murder, and not even guilty of manslaughter in the shooting death of Kate Steinle. And the jury found him guilty of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. But the reality of the story is Kate was killed while walking on San Francisco's Pier 14. This man fired the gun. Now, his defense was he fired the gun intending to just have the bullet go someplace else, and she was killed by the ricochet. Well, he was still out there pulling that trigger. And anybody who is a gun enthusiast understands when you pull that trigger, you are legally liable for where that bullet goes, even if it hits something you didn't intend to hit with it. That's why you have to be very careful about shared walls in multifamily units. But in this case, the jury didn't see it that way. He did kill her. It should have, at the very least, been manslaughter. This guy had an illegally owned weapon out in public and was holding it outwards in an irresponsible manner. That bullet traveled 78 feet, which means he was aiming it horizontally. Now, Donald Trump tweeted out, it's a disgraceful verdict, and a lot of people are wondering if there was political pressure applied to this case in order to not have an illegal immigrant convicted of murder at a time when more and more Americans are saying, seal that border. And you have the globalists, on the other hand, saying, no, no, keep the borders open. If a few people get killed, it's a small price to pay for the New World Order. Now, the defense attorney in this case responded to Donald Trump's tweet saying he's promoting hate and says the client's illegal status has no relevance. Yes, it does. This guy had been deported many times and kept sneaking back into the country. If he'd been kept out of the country, Kate would still be alive today. Yes, his illegal status is relevant. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here and getting into the wonderful world of political correctness. Apparently in France, they're considering a law that would make insults based on gender a crime. I'm not even really sure what they mean by that, but it's part of this apparent agenda to get us so concerned about what we're saying and doing that we become isolated and paralyzed. And by the way, George Orwell predicted this as well in 1984. Just get people so worried about offending everybody else or saying something that's bad or doing something that's bad that they, in effect, become incapable of any action. So, up in Sweden, they've got a new government report written by the Swedish National Defense Research Institute, and it's called The White Hatred. and it characterizes Sweden's new media, in other words, any media that doesn't blindly regurgitate politically correct narratives, as threats to democracy, equating them with neo-Nazi groups. And apparently in this report, they make the claim that putting the word refugees in quotation marks is hate. I mean, that's how absurd this is getting. And apparently using the term unaccompanied children in quotation marks is also a form of hate, because it implies that these unaccompanied children might actually be adults. And as it turns out, most of them are. Now, as you know, it's Christmas time. And apparently this LGBT activist has put a nativity scene in front of their home with 2 St. Josephs and no Virgin Mary. And people are calling it the gaytivity scene. And apparently somebody responded with a lesbian nativity scene that had 2 statues of Mary and Jesus in a rainbow blanket. Isn't it funny how the same people who are telling us to be careful that we don't offend anybody else are perfectly happy to come on out and do things that are probably going to be very offensive to Christians? Seems like a double standard out there. As far as the one with the 2 St. Josephs and no Virgin Mary, I just had to post with it that YouTube clip from the movie Life of Brian, where this one guy is saying, I want to be a woman, I want to have babies. And the other guy says, you can't have babies. He says, oh, you're oppressing me, you're oppressing me. He says, no, where's the baby going to gestate? I mean, that was satire, and we're there now. We've actually become a Monty Python society. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, there was a news site called Medusa Magazine, and lately they've been getting a lot of attention because of its social justice articles that basically parroted the liberal talking points about gender and sexuality issues. And this website was cited by several major corporate media sources and sparked outrage and agreement by commenters. But apparently, earlier this week, this Medusa Magazine site was shut down, and the person behind it came on out and said, this was a satire site. This was all a hoax. It was a joke. But because they were saying the politically correct things, they were supportive of, they appear to be supportive of the agenda, the corporate media just went right along and said, oh yes, according to Medusa Magazine, you know, all men are bad, terrible, evil things. And Medusa Magazine was supposed to satirize the feminist far left, and apparently the feminist far left didn't realize they were being satirized. Now, as you know, we're coming up next month on the vote on net neutrality, and it's a contentious issue. Most ordinary Americans want the Internet to be declared a public utility and run like one. They want the common carrier concept to be enforced, as it is with telephones. Now, the FCC had this open comments period, which ended in August. And apparently, data scientist Jeff Cowell did a study that found at least 1.3 million anti-net neutrality comments registered with the FCC were faked. They came from a single central source. And when he took out all the fake comments that were botted into the FCC, basically found that 99% of the comments supported net neutrality. Now, the big ISPs, they want more money. And the way they're going to get more money, I mean, they're not putting it into their systems. Nobody's getting the bandwidth they actually pay for in this country, as it turns on out. But what they want is they want to have a fast lane for their fellow corporations for content delivery, which they will charge for. But because bandwidth is not infinite, to carve out the fast lane for the corporate content means taking bandwidth away from everybody else. And we're already dealing with very limited bandwidth, especially here in Hawaii. I pay Spectrum for 300 megabits coming into the home. I'm lucky if I get 60 download and 6 upload. That's the reality. And when net neutrality ends, it's going to get worse. Now, one of the downsides, if you will, of all of these cyber weapons being leaked out of NSA, they're getting into the hands of cyber criminals. And I'm looking at this article that came out of Bloomberg saying that these cyber criminals have incredibly sophisticated ways to breach banks' defenses. Well, yeah, they're using weapons developed to be weapons of war. And apparently, according to the SWIFT Global Payments Network, there's been a significant evolution in the threat level just in the last 18 months. And the cyber criminals are deploying increasingly sophisticated ways of breaching bank cyber defenses to launch finely orchestrated attacks. And intruders can spend more than a year preparing their attacks against a target. Now, yet another former NSA analyst faces criminal charges. This is the story of Karen Melton Stewart. She was a foreign language intelligence analyst with the Weapons and Space Directorate at the NSA, and she discovered that the Russians were selling GPS jammers to Iraq before the 2003 U.S. invasion. And the jammers would have caused missiles using GPS for navigation to go off target. And apparently she did 6 months of reports delineating the technical attributes of the GPS jammers. And apparently she was credited by her management team with saving thousands of American lives. So this was a good thing. It allowed the U.S. to basically circumvent the GPS jammers. But apparently Stewart got passed over for a promotion based on her work. And in trying to find out what was going on, the lady who got the job she wanted basically turned out to be a honey trap, which led to the exposure of an NSA inside the NSA running a blackmail cell. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Facebook is out with a new AI scanner, scanning people's messages on Facebook. And apparently, if you post a troubling comment as determined by this AI system, you will be reported to authorities as a possible potential suicide. If you post anything on Facebook that makes it sound like you might be thinking about suicide, you will be arrested. And, of course, they're going to get a lot of innocent people. All right, we're going to take some phone calls here. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. And kind of in the same vein here, we know that it's a crime for the FBI to lie to the FBI, but how about, has anybody ever been held accountable for the FBI or the intelligence community lying to us?
I don't know. It's a one-way street.
And, like
it's a one-way street. You know, you can't lie to the government, but government lies to you all the time. That's how they have an advantage over you.
Yeah, this thing with Google about doing something suicidal or reporting you as suicidal if you say something that they don't like, it's the same thing. It's just a continuation of the can't criticize Israel thing. It's the same basic argument. And by the way, you'll probably get the gun rights of those people taken away as well. So it will be completely subjective to criticize Israel. You're not allowed to do that. You'll probably end up losing gun rights over that. Down the road, with the AI for the Google and the whole suicidal thing, if you're suicidal, yeah, Facebook, they'll take away your gun rights. That's the way they'll attack the Second Amendment on that. And they'll do it basically against, you were saying, by the way, earlier how it seems to be open season on Christians. And the simple answer to that is because the media tells you who your enemy should be. You're not allowed to criticize Israel, but but you can criticize
white males.
It's open season. And white males, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's being directed that way. It has been directed that way for a long time. You can't even, this country is, I'm telling you, this is a very toxic thing. I'm a little upset that Trump is caving in, apparently, and going to move. Have you covered moving to Jerusalem? He's apparently ready to. Yeah,
I did cover that. I covered that earlier in the week, and yeah, I'm very disappointed in Trump. I'm not surprised though, because he's very tight with Netanyahu. Apparently, Trump's father and Netanyahu were buddy, and I'm not surprised about that part of it at all. What I mostly wanted from Donald Trump was a change to the war policy, which he campaigned on. No more foreign interventions. What I wanted from Trump was Hillary Clinton in jail for all the crimes she's committed, all the lives she's ruined, including my own. What I wanted Trump to do was to take a serious look at how our economy is functioning and make some fundamental changes to turn the system around, and he hasn't done any of those.
Yeah, exactly the same with me, Mike. And adding in I was for controlling immigration as well. But, I had a discussion with my wife this morning talking about, and she was very upset at this new tax plan that's about to be endorsed and signed into law. And she gets angry at me because my wife is a City of LA worker, and she's much more pro-government than am I. And I keep telling her, well, I have nothing against the city. They pick up our trash, and we have libraries, and they put out our fires, and we get something back for what we pay for with the city. But with the feds, she goes, well, what do you think about this tax plan? I say, it's awful. And she says, what should we do about it? I said, I call these guys all the time. You can't do anything. And I said, I hate to say it, but the only thing I can see is the only way is we have to fight. It's at the point where we have to fight. And nothing's going to change, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I can't say that to anybody because it's alarming to people. But that's where we are, in my opinion. It's so far down the road. Mike, we're going to have to fight.
I don't know how alarming it's going to be because, unfortunately, I'm hearing a lot of that in the callers to the show and some emails that I get. But again, I really would like to avoid a civil war or a revolution in the streets of America, and I am still thinking that the most likely outcome for where we are right now is a Soviet Union-style collapse of our central government. I mean, they're already eating each other politically in the media. The economy can't hold together much longer. And so I really do think they're getting close to the end. The big problem here is how do we keep the U.S. government from incinerating much of the world in their own death throes? And that's a distinct possibility that we have to look at. I remember when the Soviet Union collapsed, the first thing the rest of the world said is, who's in control of the nuclear weapons?
Right. And it's a hell of a danger. But and while they're doing all that, while they're terrorizing the rest of the world, they're going to be terrorizing us too, as they already are, really. So.
Yeah, it is. We've become a very oppressive society, a surveillance state. The U.S. government has gone way beyond what the Nazis could do, and even the Soviet Union under Stalin. And it's a reminder that whatever the government can do, it's going to do, just out of this idea that they have to be protected from the American people, because the American people aren't believing the lies anymore.
And there's absolutely no way that I can see, Mike, that this will be reformed internally, ever. It will never reform itself, this system. And I also I can't see anybody on the horizon that's even a possible a viable opposition leader.
Well, that's what we thought Trump was going to be, but the system protects itself, and whatever it took to get Donald Trump to abandon his supporters and go with the current agenda, they'll just do it to anybody else. You're right. The system will never reform itself because everybody on the inside of the system is getting rich and powerful and having a lot of fun being on the inside of that system. So they'll never change it. It has to go away. I would prefer it went away with the Soviet Union-style collapse. I understand a lot of people are thinking that a revolution is justified. And again, I would like to avoid that. But on the other hand, if one starts, I'm certainly not going to throw my delicate little body in the front of it to protect the government. I'm going to stand off to one side with a camera and take some pictures.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to avoid it, but at some point, it's so oppressive already and getting more so every day. I don't see, it won't reform itself, and like I told my wife, and I don't say this to people, Mike. I mean, I don't really speak politics to a lot of people. I do here, but I'm sort of anonymous here, you know. But I don't want to alarm people. We went to a dinner party last night, and everybody was feeling the same thing.
Yes.
But I pull back and say, I don't go as far as I'm saying right now that I don't see any way out of it other than fighting, frankly. So it's just beyond utterance. So. Yeah,
I'm seeing that around here as well. I'm hearing similar things from across the country, and that for me would be a terrible thing, because I don't think the American people as a whole are really ready to have a revolution and have a good outcome, and that's another reason to try and hold it back. Anyway, Peter, we're going to let you go. We got a bunch of calls waiting on the phone lines here, and I'd like to get to them. So we're going to switch over to Mike in Brazil. Mike, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Hello, Mike in Brazil. You're on the air.
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to say that Peter from Los Angeles is dead on. He's absolutely correct. I agree with him 100%. A revolution is inevitable, Mike. It's what's going to happen is this. It's going to be a triggering event. Whether it's staged or not, that's not the point. There's going to be a triggering event. People are going to go crazy, and the shooting is going to start. And talking about shooting, here in Brazil, guns are illegal. You cannot buy guns. There are no gun stores anywhere except for police officers and military personnel and all that. I have a gun, okay? So I have a SIG, okay, P226, 9mm, okay? And I had a confrontation with 3 thugs outside my house. I was outside, and they tried to steal my cell phone. And I pulled out the gun, and I pointed it at them. And I said, you want to go, you want to get my cell phone? Come on, come and get it. They ran like rabbits. Yes. Like rabbits. I didn't have to fire one shot, Mike. I didn't have to fire one shot. Somebody called the cops because they saw me with a gun in the hand. And when the cops came, they said, where'd you get this? And I said, well, I bought it in Bolivia. And they said, you know, this is an illegal gun. I mean, especially the caliber, because here they have restricted calibers and civilian calibers. Civilian calibers is anything smaller than a 7.65 millimeter. And mine was a 9mm, which is a law enforcement round, okay? Mm-hmm. And the cops said, you know what, I'll let you go this time, but don't show it to anybody, all right? So they just left me alone, and it just ended right then and there. Now, and I said,
sorry, I got to let you go. We got to do a break for commercials. But I share your concerns, and okay. Good that you have a gun. We'll be right back after these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And following up on the call from Mike in Brazil, there was once a country that had that same idea. Only the police and the military were allowed to have guns, and ordinary citizens were not. It was called Nazi Germany. Didn't really work out all that well, so let's not make that mistake again. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Tom in Connecticut, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Mike, let me ask you a question. There's something that your audience needs to know. Let me ask you this. The Hispanics come to the country and they have all these TV stations and news networks and radio and all that. How come the Germans don't have that? How come the Italians don't have that all over the United States? How come the French don't have that? The Danish, the Swedes, the Norwegians? How come all these people that came to this country don't have their own radio stations 24 hours, pumping in their own language, doing their own TV stations 24 hours? You're talking about Babel, the Tower of Babel here. And can you imagine, Mike, with all these other cultures that came to this country to make us the greatest country on earth? Imagine if you had 24 hours of Italian radio stations and TV stations, and you didn't have English. I mean, but the Hispanics come here, and they don't come here to compliment. They come here to demand and hate from you. And it's not like, here in South Florida, they want radio stations 24 hours. They want TV stations. They don't have that in any other language.
Well, a lot of that, let's be honest, is driven by the economics of the situation.
Milwaukee, and what do they get in Milwaukee, Michael? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just going to say, for somebody to set up a radio or TV station, they have to know that there's going to be a large enough audience to generate the ad revenues to be in business. Now, here in Hawaii, we have radio stations that are in Japanese, Chinese, a bunch of other languages I don't even recognize because we are a pan-racial society. But, of course, everybody's also well integrated into the society we have out here. I think the reason Norwegians don't have their own TV stations or radio stations is there aren't enough of them in a given market to make it financially viable. And, of course, these days, people who want to hear information in their own language, they can go on the Internet now. But you're absolutely right. The big problem we have, both with the illegal immigrants and with the refugees, is they don't want to assimilate. They are coming on in and demanding that we adjust to their way of life. Well, if their way of life was so good, why are they here? Why didn't they stay where they are? Cartels, if you remember Fast and Furious. But you're absolutely right. The Aztlan movement, I think it's called, they want to basically undo the agreement that General Santa Anna signed with Sam Houston, which basically said, yes, you get all of this land that used to be Mexico, and it's now going to be the independent Republic of Texas. And then, of course, Texas was annexed by the United States government and the western lands eventually as well. So that's the historical precedent for that claim. But on the other hand, if everybody starts going around and saying, well, we're going to undo the role of history, nobody's going to know who owns what anymore. When Bill Clinton signed that public apology law acknowledging the illegal annexation of Hawaii, a lot of the traditional Hawaiian families came on out and said, well, this invalidates all the land titles that were taken away from the indigenous Hawaiians and given to the military and everything else. And there was a big stink in the courts. And finally, the legislature just declared by imperial edict that all the current land titles are the correct ones. So the people whose land had been stolen weren't able to do anything about that. But again, the basic problem.
Yeah, Michael. You know, another thing is what's going on with this Russian thing. All you hear in the media is about Russia, Trump, Russia, and now you got this Flynn guy. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Let's go back to the phones here, and now we're going to do Tom in Connecticut. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, well, a couple sobering conversations the last few, but on a Korea thing. You find it curious that I want somebody to stand up and say, "What? Well, our missile defense systems could easily knock this stuff out. I don't know why everybody's getting so upset about this. We're fine, unless it's all a scam."
Of course, it's a scam. They want to take more money away from the people and put it into the military-industrial complex, who then will turn around and funnel much of that money back into congressional campaigns. But the American people of my generation and my parents' generation forked over $5 trillion, and that was back when a trillion really represented a lot of money, for America's nuclear deterrent. which we still have. We have all the bombers, we have the submarines, we have the missile silos all over the Midwest. And the idea here is that nobody will dare attack us because it would be national suicide. Well, either that deterrent works and we have nothing to fear from North Korea, or it doesn't work, in which case we're all owed a refund. And that's the reality. We don't need an Army or a Navy or Marines or any of that as long as we have that nuclear deterrent, if in fact defense is our concern. But what the Pentagon is really about is projecting power into other people's countries.
Missile shield supposed to be like something that's supposed to be helpful also?
Well, it's supposed
like knocking things out of the air instead of being an attack mechanism.
Well, the missile defense shield definitely is defensive, but the problem is, like so many other boondoggles we've seen from the military, like the F-35, the missile defense shield doesn't really work as well as advertised. And we've already got James Inhofe is already out there saying we need a new missile defense program. And, it's not his money he's spending, it's yours.
Arsenal with another, $1 trillion they're talking about?
Yeah, they're talking about updating all of that. And the problem is that with Russia's newest generation reentry vehicles that are maneuverable, it's going to go right past our current missile defense system. And, of course, the military is now saying, well, we need to put more research into zero-time-of-flight weaponry, particle beams and lasers, but they've never been able to get those to work over a long distance because of that pesky problem with the atmosphere.
All the major cities would be locked down.
Yeah.
There would be nothing to do there.
I don't think a revolution is a good idea, and I can't imagine anything that would change my mind.
I'm on board with that idea, sure. Okay, take care. Thank you.
All right, thank you. But I concede, one may be inevitable anyway, despite my best efforts. All right, Miles in Maine. Aloha, Miles. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Bag searching in movie theaters. Do you recall that?
Yes.
You go to the movie theater, they search your bag. Here's a more plausible explanation. It's not about security. I think it's an excuse to see if we carry food and cameras in our bags. They want us to buy their own overpriced junk.
Yes.
I don't know any other civilized country in the world that does that. I mean, we spent trillions of dollars in security, and we've lost most of our freedoms. So, I mean, imagine, go to a movie theater, they just treat you like a criminal or something.
Well, that's one of the reasons Claire and I don't go to movie theaters anymore. But what is happening with the security industrial complex is the same thing that happened with the military industrial complex. It's become so large and has so much economic power, it can literally warp the society and the government to feed its own greed. Eisenhower warned us about the military industrial complex, and he was absolutely right. And now we have, along with the military-industrial complex, the security-industrial complex, the medical-industrial complex, and these large ad hoc organizations or enterprises are all about feeding their own greed and at the expense of the American people.
I mean, now it's easy for the people to boycott the movie theaters. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe it was difficult. There was nothing else to do. But now with so many other choices, we can very easily boycott them if they want to degrade us when we go to the movie theater. I mean, you go there to relax. You don't go there to be like when you go to an airport.
Yeah, I had the same reaction at Disneyland. The last time Claire and I were in Southern California, we hadn't been to Disneyland in 15 years, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we drove on over there, and we're in this line, and they're searching everybody's purses and backpacks and patting them down. And I turned to Claire and I said, I can't be happy and relaxed going through this. And we just turned around and we left. And we'll probably, if you go back and you look at photos of Nazi Germany, the police and the military, they would just stop people in the middle of the street and, pull their pants out, look down and make sure that they weren't carrying something. We're there. We're at that same degree of oppression, repression, if you will, And again, I do wish people would wake up, but again, on the other hand, I am not in favor of a revolution, although I concede one may be coming.
Right. Yeah, if there was a revolution, it would be a disaster. It would be nothing progressive, so it's better not to have a revolution.
Like I said, the signs I'm seeing are that the U.S. federal government is heading for a Soviet Union-style collapse. And there are quite a few striking parallels. The most important, of course, being the complete loss of faith and trust in that central government by the general population. And the Soviet Union was brought down by excessive military spending, which our government is now engaged in, and they were brought down by the people creating a peer-to-peer news reporting service called the Samizdat, which was actually based on fax machines. They didn't even have personal computers there. And it still exposed the government's wrongdoing to the general population until finally the people just stopped listening to what the government had to say. And it couldn't function any longer, and it came apart. And I think we're coming up on that same moment here in the United States.
In the old Soviet Union, people knew, the majority of people knew that the government was lying. But here with the media, these guys are very smooth. And I don't think the American people believe that the MSM are lying. I mean, you know that. I mean, you understand that when you talk to people around you. Just it's not. They don't know that the people are the New York Times, the NPR, the CNN. They are lying. It's a different response from what the Soviet.
I'm not so sure anymore. I mean, the polls are showing that public trust and confidence in the corporate media is at an all-time low. It's in the single digits. And so I think we're at that same point. The American people know the media is lying to them. That's been growing ever since the claim about Saddam's nuclear weapons. Now the American people are realizing the extent to which our elections are being rigged. So there's an awareness that is growing across the land. And again, it's going to lead to a point where the people are just going to say, this is not my government, it's not what's in the Constitution, and I'm just not going to do what they say anymore. Peaceful, nonviolent, non-cooperation. That worked for Gandhi in India, and it could work as well here. Gandhi made an observation about tyrants, and he says there have always been tyrants, and for a while they can seem invincible, but they always fall. And he was right. Hitler fell, Stalin fell, Ceausescu fell, rather hard, and the Soviet Union collapsed, and I think that's what's going to happen here in the U.S.
All the countries you mentioned, except the Soviet Union, they collapsed from outside. Only the Soviet Union collapsed from within, but now it re-emerged as Russia, and now they have the similar problems with. The West is.
Well, the West is trying to create this image that it's the rebirth of the Soviet Union, as part of the war propaganda. And by the way, Rome also collapsed from internal, over too much debt, too much corruption, and following the loss of the 3 legions in Germany, they couldn't police their empire any longer. They began to fragment and break away. Well, by the time Rome was sacked, it was obvious the empire was already falling. I mean, it had already split to the Eastern and Western empires, and the Western Empire collapsed, and the Eastern Empire eventually became the Ottoman Empire. Anyway, Jack, we're going to let you go. We're running out of time. We're coming up to the top of the hour. And so we're going to switch over to Curtis in Nevada. Aloha, Curtis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just wanted to try to finish off a point or two on this female harassment crisis that we're experiencing right now. My general point is that I don't think that it works where you can just hand over by doctrine to any group, to any race, to any gender, implied power. That you can go out there and you compete and everything, and that other side is going to go along with it because we say they must. This is basically what it is. It's not sustainable. It will collapse. And there's 3/4 of the world waiting for that to happen. When there's a void in power, that void is going to be filled very quickly. And I think that we know what happens to a population of men who are conquered. I know 80% of us will probably be gone at least, and that 60% of women left will have to make a choice. That's basically what and I think it was yesterday where you made a comment about how once civilization goes past the point of just surviving, that they're trying to elevate all parts of the civilization, and that's part of the whole feminist movement. I understand that, but I don't think that we've ever seen in history where the masses, the percentage of masses that we need that have the actual ability of common sense and critical thinking to make that work.
Let me think about that for a little bit. I mean, you're absolutely correct that the militant feminist movement literally sees a world without men, or maybe a world organized like beehives where 99.9% of the population are female and they only keep around enough males to keep the queen reproducing new bees. But
the Amazon society, right?
Yeah, well, the Amazon society. But the idea is nobody's handing these groups the power. They're trying to seize it through political and propaganda means. But again, with the population losing trust and confidence in the corporate media, I think these things are a lot less effective than they used to be. If you look at this huge push for Antifa and Black Lives Matter to try and kick up race riots in the country, it never really got any traction. So I think, you know, the militant feminist movement in the 90s burned itself out. They discredited themselves. Yes, they're being revived again, but I don't think they're going to do any better now than they did back then.
Right. Well, you know, it remains to be seen if the women in general go along with this, and you know, we don't know that. I hope not, but it's possible.
It can only exist if everybody living in it is basically a saint, and that's not reality. Civilizations, when they're first starting up, their goal is to elevate themselves. Nations tend to go through this life cycle where there'll be a blooming start of a new nation, and they'll grow and they'll prosper. Then the population gets complacent. Then corruption starts to take on over. You get the bread and circuses phase, and then finally it all collapses from that corruption. It happened to Rome, and it's happening here as well. Anyway, listen, I'm going to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break here.
Okay,
and bye-bye. I'm going to try. Remember what I said before about you're responsible for where a bullet goes when you fire it, applying it to this case of this illegal immigrant. Apparently, a New York man has been charged with second-degree manslaughter. He shot and killed a woman that he thought was a deer. Apparently was out there hunting. And he heard something in the bushes and thought it was a deer, and he pulled the trigger, which you never should do. You always check your targets. We're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to be back for some fast phone calls, followed by the lovely Lady Claire. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, hello, Mike. Hello. I didn't know Dick Cheney moved to New York.
I don't know that he actually lives in New York, but he's definitely tangled up with that New York subsidiary of that company, the one that got that oil contract from Israel.
No, I meant because the guy who shot the woman thought she was a deer. Didn't Dick Cheney shoot somebody?
Yeah, you're right. Was out there shooting captive game and turned around and shot his lawyer, and then the lawyer was forced to apologize for inconveniencing him. That was absurd.
It's you know, Mike, they idolize illegal aliens and Wahhabist terrorists. Either CNN, they always come to bat for them, and it's been indoctrinated over there, you know, like in California especially, and New York, and, you know, in Oregon, and all these other states where it's like, it's crazy. I mean, the guy killed this woman. Like,
yes.
I mean, I don't understand.
Well, the Department of Justice has just issued a new arrest warrant for him. So they may be getting ready to try him on federal charges.
But isn't he a threat to, like, national security? Like, there has to be some kind of statute. I mean, they can rendition people, grab people off the streets and hold them indefinitely.
Why is this guy still walking around? And if you look at the mayor and the governor, they all got, like Tucker Carlson said, they all have blood on their hands. They are responsible. The whole movement is responsible for this death.
Well, they're all tangled up with the New World Order, the global government here. Anyway, listen, Dustin, I'm sorry. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to try and fit in one more phone call before the top of the hour. Kathleen in Paris, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've always been a Democrat. And I kept, finding that I was listening, oh my God, I'm listening to Fox News. And I'm listening to people that I never would listen to before. And they were making sense. And
Kathleen, I hate to cut you off. We got to do our station break.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from 2X Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.